Yo, what's up? What's going on? What's good, everybody? The Boston Source checking in here for the October 15th, 2023 episode of the Boston Source Radio Show. That's right. We're here, we're live, and we got a number of things here that we're going to be talking about in this particular podcast. We had, a couple of fights, a couple of main events that, they take place on yesterday, and also had a couple of things in reference to undercard fights that we may end up touching on here in this particular podcast, and also talk about a few other topics here and there for this particular episode. But we got a number of things here that we're going to be going through in this one. Of course, we had a couple of world title fights, and we're going to get right to it. The first one we're going to go over is the world title fight that happened in Australia. You had Tim Tszyu versus Brian Mendoza there. That was for the WBO Super Welterweight Championship. Now, coming into, weeks into this thing, you had Tim Tszyu undefeated, and he was the WBO interim Super Welterweight champion. And Brian Mendoza was, at the time, the WBC interim Super Welterweight champion. Of course, you had Tim Tszyu undefeated, was coming off his win over Carlos Ocampo in June. He also had a stoppage win over Tony Harrison back in March there. And he was looking to see if he could get a fight or secure a fight with Jermell Charlo. But of course, what happened early this year, Jermell Charlo suffered an injury to his hand. And so while he was recovering from his hand injury, they were seeing if they were going to have a fight between, Charlo and Tim Tszyu. But while that was happening, you had the whole thing with Canelo Alvarez going down. And so Canelo Alvarez, ended up facing Jermell Charlo instead of Jermell Charlo, who many people expected Canelo Alvarez to fight. So with Jermell Charlo going up against Canelo Alvarez, you had Tim Tszyu saying, hey, he still wanted to be active. He still wanted to have another fight. So they ended up matching him up with Brian Mendoza. And Brian Mendoza was coming off of his knockout of the year candidate win over Sebastian Fedora to win the WBC interim championship. So he had that record of 22 wins and 2 losses. And, a good number of his wins, 16 wins by way of knockout, had 3 straight wins, after losing to Jesus Ramos Jr. in 2021. Now, he had the win over Benjamin Whitaker. Then he had that stoppage win over the former unified champion at 154, Jason Rosario. Then that knockout win over Sebastian Fedora to put him in position to fight Tim Tszyu. And Tim Tszyu, up until recently, was the interim WBO champion, but after September 30th, when the WBO stripped Jermell Charlo of that title, that's when they went ahead and elevated Tim Tszyu to become the WBO champion. And so this was his first defense of that world title. So you had this as a pretty good matchup. I thought it was a good matchup coming in this. Brian Mendoza, of course, had that knockout streak or the stoppage streak. And Tim Tszyu, also had a little bit of a stoppage streak of his own there. I know that he, had his little issues here and there some years back against Terrell Gausha, but he was able to win the majority of that particular fight to get the unanimous decision win. And then, like I said, he had those wins over Tony Harrison and Carlos Ocampo for this particular fight here against Brian Mendoza. And in this particular bout, I thought it was going to be a good fight. It looked like it was, starting off to be a pretty good fight. Was kind of impressed, at least to me, from what Brian Mendoza was doing in those first couple of rounds, particularly with his foot movement and, throwing the jab and, getting out of the line, getting out of the line of where Tim Tszyu was, because Tim Tszyu, pretty much, comes forward, tries to, corner his opponents, and like I was saying, tries to make the most out of his shots. But the thing about Tim Tszyu was, at least early in this particular fight, he wasn't, being very active with his, or not, being active with his punches. At least to me, he wasn't. So for the first, few rounds, 3 or 4 rounds or so, I saw Brian Mendoza kind of like taking advantage of that. Even though a lot of times he was fighting off of his back foot, he was still throwing the jab and throwing like one jab or 1 or 2 jabs and then getting out of the line of Tim Tszyu. But then after rounds 4, you had round 5 and round 6, you seen Tim Tszyu start to pick it up. He was still, doing the same thing as far as like coming forward, but sometimes he would allow, Brian Mendoza to throw, but also throw back. And a lot of the times when he threw back, he made sure that it was, a harder punch or, more effective as far as like when it landed than what Brian Mendoza was doing, and that eventually got him, to get back in the fight. He was landing more, crisper, harder shots in the middle point of the fight to get him back in it. And once you've seen that, then you've seen the activity or the movement of Brian Mendoza to, go down a little bit while he was still, trying to move off his back foot and back up and back up. He was still going to the ropes, and he was kind of like waiting for what Tim Tszyu was going to do first before he, responded back. And when he did that, he pretty much allowed Tim Tszyu to be more concise in what he was, trying to do as far as like landing those shots against Brian Mendoza. And you've seen a lot of big shots coming from Tim Tszyu in this particular bout. And Brian Mendoza was getting caught with a good amount of some good shots. But he took those shots, man. Brian Mendoza, you got to give props to Brian Mendoza, man. He was taking some serious shots there in this particular fight, and was able to take them. A lot of those hooks, number of those uppercuts, particularly what was that, like round eight or so. He took like a couple of big uppercuts there from Tim Tszyu, and still was able to fight out of it. And you've seen the bruises coming out of there from Brian Mendoza. But he was still game, still able to be in there in the fight. And even in the 11th and 12th round, you see more activity coming from Brian Mendoza in those last couple of rounds. Now, for someone like me that seeing that this was like one of the biggest opportunities there for Brian Mendoza, I would have thought that he would try to go after Tim Tszyu a little bit more. You know what I'm saying? But he kind of like held back, particularly in rounds 8 to 10, for Tim Tszyu to get, into this fight and have the overall advantage over the course of this fight. And so that's why you pretty much had this be a unanimous decision victory in favor of Tim Tszyu for him to have that first defense of the WBO super welterweight title. You had one score of 116-112. Another score of 116-111, and then another score of 117-111 in favor of not Brian Mendoza, but Tim Tszyu, right? So that was pretty much in essence, 2 judges giving, I guess, Tim Tszyu 8 rounds, and 1 judge giving Tim Tszyu 9 rounds. Now, for me, at least, looking at it live, I thought Brian Mendoza was doing very well in the first half of the fight. I thought he was boxing very well. His movements were, really good there over the course of those first 4 or 5 rounds. And I thought that he, kind of like won the majority of those particular rounds, but then, once it got to the middle rounds, you see Tim Tszyu pick it up. And once he picked up the activity, that's when you saw Brian Mendoza's, punch output be diminished fairly significantly over those course of those rounds, and that's why I kind of like say that, at least by that 8th round or so, whatever it was, that's when I felt like, Tim Tszyu got pretty much back in the fight. There was like a string of consecutive rounds that Tim Tszyu, fairly won, and it was not really, much debate that he won those rounds. But I think in reference to what the scorecards were indicating, maybe they felt like those early rounds, or majority of those early rounds, were really close. And usually when they're really close, sometimes they give it in favor of, who's there as far as like, hometown fighter or whatever it is. Maybe that was it. Or, how some may say, hey, they give the champion the benefit of the doubt if there's a close round. maybe that was it. But I just felt like, Brian Mendoza was doing very well over the course of those early rounds, and how he was boxing, how he was, uh, keeping his distance away from Tim Tszyu, and kind of like, throwing the jab and being very, very consistent with the jab, before Tim Tszyu could do anything. But once it got to, like I said, those middle rounds, you just pretty much seen Tim Tszyu pick up the activity as far as like the power punches were concerned. I thought we would have had a little bit more body work, from both fighters, but you didn't quite see that. There was one particular time when Tim Tszyu had like a serious advantage, throwing or landing a good number of shots on Brian Mendoza. And when Brian Mendoza was, at the ropes, he pretty much threw a punch that grazed the lower, or pretty much below the belt of Tim Tszyu, that had Tim Tszyu kind of like go back. And when he went back, he kind of like tapped his, he tapped his trunks that it was a low blow. But the referee didn't do nothing. And at least at that particular time, if you're Brian Mendoza, you're away. This is your first, fight out of the States or whatnot. And I mean, he's there open. You'll go ahead and get him. Sneak in a couple shots, bim. You know what I'm saying? You don't know if you're gonna have another opportunity where you're gonna be able to seriously affect Tim Tszyu with that particular instance. So, while Tim Tszyu was like backing up, you got to be able to take advantage of that. Brian Mendoza didn't, quite take advantage of that particular point, and that was that. So you have Tim Tszyu there with the defense of that WBO super welterweight title. He is now 24-0. Brian Mendoza falls to 22-3. Now, I mean, for me, over the course of the past year or so, or for a while now, it's kind of been documented that I hadn't really seen something that says that like Tim Tszyu is at the very, very top, or he should be placed as like number one there in the super welterweight division of 154 pounds. This particular victory over Brian Mendoza, was a good win for him, good solid win for him against Brian Mendoza. I'd like to see what happens with him, next. I know that, over the course of, this telecast that happened or during the fight, they were saying like Tim Tszyu was hinting at like saying that this would be his last fight in Australia for a while. He wants to, continue to have fights, but have them over in the States. So he's looking for those fights against, maybe the Jermell Charlo, fight with Jermell Charlo, maybe against Terence Crawford, and that it would be in Las Vegas or something like that. I mean, remember, he was originally scheduled to face Jermell Charlo in Las Vegas in January of this year before, Jermell Charlo had that hand injury. So, and even before, this whole thing with Jermell Charlo getting in position to fight Canelo Alvarez, they were still considering having that fight still be over in Vegas. And if it was not going to be in Australia, they didn't mind if it wasn't going to be in Australia as long as they were able to secure that fight with Jermell Charlo. So for Tim Tszyu, he's really, really looking for that fight against Jermell Charlo, next year. And that's something that he would really, really want to show, like he wants to be considered as the number one guy at 154 pounds. And pretty much the only way you could do that is if you fight and defeat Jermell Charlo. Now, of course, Jermell Charlo went up to 168 or the super middleweight division to face Canelo Alvarez and lost that fight, convincingly there on September 30th. So we got to see what happens with Jermell Charlo here over the next, set of months or so, because, we said that he's looking for, those big fights. From this point forward, he's looking for big fights. Now, I mean, he did mention Terence Crawford as a potential fight, for him thereafter, facing Canelo Alvarez, but you still have Tim Tszyu there. And, even after winning the undisputed title Jermell Charlo has been fairly dismissive of Tim Tszyu. That he doesn't feel like Tim Tszyu should even be near or around the same stratosphere as he is. But still, regardless, that's still a big fight. That's still a big fight there in the super welterweight division. I know that there's a number of other contenders that are out there. You did have what happened on September 30th with, the Erickson Lubin win over Jesus Ramos to put Erickson Lubin, back in the picture there in the super welterweight division. So there's still a number of fights that could be made there at 154. Shout out to Chip Billis here live on the chat. What's going on with you, man? I'm trying to get reactions here to Tim Tszyu's performance first against Brian Mendoza. Like I said, I mean, at first I felt like that was a very good fight between two fighters that are at or around the top 5 at the 154-pound division, and I felt like Brian Mendoza definitely made a good account of himself in this particular fight. It was just that what happened in the second half of the fight and the lack of activity from Brian Mendoza kind of like had Tim Tszyu get right back in the fight. Now, like I said, I mean, there was a couple of instances where it seemed like Tim Tszyu was going to be able to score a knockdown or maybe a knockout or a stoppage victory over Brian Mendoza, but Brian Mendoza is a very, very tough thing there. Tip says like you expected more. Did you expect more out of Tim Tszyu or something like that? Because maybe you kind of favored Tim Tszyu to get the stoppage victory over Brian Mendoza. Now, leading into this particular fight, some people pointed out that, and I think MVO, was a guest on here last week. Kind of like said this in reference to Brian Mendoza, and that in his fight against Sebastian Fundora, like he was, losing that fight. He was losing that fight, and then he ended up, getting that, uppercut and then the hook combination to put Sebastian Fundora down on the canvas there in order for him to win that fight. He said expected more from Tip says both fighters. I mean, hey, maybe kind of seeing a little bit there where you seen there were openings that both fighters could have had for them to take advantage of. Like I said in reference to Brian Mendoza, there were times when he was in a little bit of a pickle, but then when he responded and then he had like one little shot that went down downstairs like it was going to the body, but it ended up being below the trunks and the referee didn't see it. And so Tim Tszyu backed up. And when Tim Tszyu backed up, he wasn't punching. So go ahead and, get some in, bim. You know what I'm saying? Get it in there, see what happens and see if you can significantly hurt Tim Tszyu at that particular point, So there was that. Tip says that Mendoza, completely took his foot off the gas. I mean, yeah, in a sense, yeah. For me, I thought it was, what he was doing in those first few rounds, being very active, and I know he was very active in those first couple of minutes of the first round. He was really trying to get at Tim Tszyu there in that particular instance to, try to throw Tim Tszyu off guard in that first round. But after he did that, he kind of, did things to, move around the ring a little bit better. But while he was moving around the ring, he was throwing the jab. He was very, very consistent with the jab, throwing it, getting out of the pocket, moving his feet, moving his head, giving Tim Tszyu different looks. It wasn't, like just having your hands up, but he was, moving his head, throwing things, trying to catch and slip, catch and shoot, move around there to, kind of like throw off Tim Tszyu. You know what I'm saying? But after about 4 rounds, you kind of seen him just be relegated to backing up to the ropes and just not doing much of anything, allowing Tim Tszyu to score when he was able to score, shout out to that guy in the building. He says, I like to see the plan for Erickson Lubin because it must be a big fight or something like that. Yeah, like Erickson Lubin, Erickson Lubin, he was able to box very well against Jesus Ramos Jr. in that particular fight. And, at least for me, when I was watching that particular fight live there in the T-Mobile Arena, for a majority of the early parts of that fight, I just felt like, Erickson Lubin was just outboxing Jesus Ramos, and that Jesus Ramos was just moving forward and not doing anything, moving forward, trying to get in the range or try to get Erickson Lubin smothered up. But he really didn't do much until, like, I would say, second half of the fight. And then you kind of, seen Jesus Ramos do a couple of things to work, but he didn't really land much clean on Erickson Lubin to really have Erickson Lubin in much trouble. So that's why, once the fight went 12 rounds and they put it in favor of Erickson Lubin, I wasn't, necessarily surprised about that because, like I said, over the majority of that first part of the fight, you really just seen Erickson Lubin kind of fight his type of a fight and not really be much effective with what Jesus Ramos was doing. Now, with Erickson Lubin against Tim Tszyu, maybe, Lubin could have that similar type of style or similar type of strategy, but at least with Tim Tszyu will probably be more accurate. At least I feel like he's going to be more accurate than what Jesus Ramos was. And he's, more experienced in a sense than Jesus Ramos when it comes to, cutting off the ring, getting your opponent into the corner, setting up shots and that type of a thing. So I think Tim Tszyu will probably be a little bit better off or be more successful in trying to take advantage of those openings if he's able to corner someone like Erickson Lubin there. So that's kind of like how I feel in reference to that fight, if that, fight happens. Like I said, Erickson Lubin getting that win over Jesus Ramos, puts him back in the mix there in the 154-pound division. And, just going real quick, in the WBA, they have Erickson Lubin at number 3, and also the IBF has Erickson Lubin at number 3. But, as of right now, Erickson Lubin is number 10 in the WBO rankings. But they just recently had their convention, that ended on Friday. So I think, within the next couple of days, you're going to see the new rankings there for the WBO, and then we'll see where Erickson Lubin is going to be at that particular point. But like I said, you now have Tim Tszyu as a full champion there for the WBO. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, what's going to be next for Tim Tszyu? Like I said, you got Tim Tszyu out there. He's been clamoring for that fight against Jermell Charlo, and that's going to be pretty interesting to see what happens there in this instance, as you have Jermell Charlo, who, was the undisputed champion. Now he goes back down to 154. He'll still be kind of like rated as the top guy, 154, but he might only have 2 of the 3 titles, as the IBF is kind of like saying, hey, you're going to have to do something with Backroom Murtazaliev or we might strip you. But I'm like, man, they just be real. Jermell Charlo ain't interested in no Backroom Murtazaliev, man. Like that ain't gonna happen, So it's either you go back down to 154 and you fight Tim Tszyu or you fight Terence Crawford. You know what I'm saying? Now with Terence Crawford, like I mentioned before, Terence Crawford, undisputed welterweight champion. It's either have the rematch with Errol Spence or see about going up to 154 and fighting for the world title at 154. And with him being the super champion at welterweight, he gets first dibs over whoever would be the next, guy, top guy there in the WBO rankings. So he will be able to go straight to facing Tim Tszyu. Now, would he be interested in that particular fight? I don't know. But he still has that, instance in where he could be a world champion at 154. So he'd have titles at, 135, 140, 147, and 154. So if Terence Crawford wants to say, hey, maybe I could go ahead and take advantage of that opportunity and have this fight with Tim Tszyu if the fight with Errol Spence falls through. Now, for those in the mix as far as like the business, the boxing business, as far as like what'll happen, as far as like some things within the sport of boxing, because of that, they're kind of iffy on if the fight between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence will happen at least by the end of this year. So you're seeing if maybe that could be put off until like February, or if it's all falls together. And if it's all falls together, then it may be, at least for me, it would be a money issue. It's not about, anything reference to a competitive standpoint. You said Mel will definitely have a fill out back in 154. I mean, yeah, I would think so. I would think that would be a good thing for him to do, But you got, like I said, you have backward murders Aliyev there, the IBF. You got Israel Madrimov at the top of the WBA. What was it? Charles Conwell is there at the top of the WBC. So, I don't know, man. Maybe he'll have him face like a Sebastian Fundora. I don't know, man. But like I said, while I was at the post-fight presser for Canelo Charlo, and I at least was, there for the Jermell Charlo thing, he said he's only looking for big fights. So you propose a Israel Madrimov to him, or Backward Murders Aliyev to him, he's gonna be like, man, nah, man. I don't think he'll be real interested in that. And going right into a fight with Tim Tszyu, the money will probably be there, but will he be interested in it? I don't know. If he has a Tim Tszyu or a Terence Crawford, of course he's going to go for a Terence Crawford fight. But if Terence Crawford's not there, then you have the Tim Tszyu fight, and he'll say, "Hey, listen, let's go for it. Let's do this. Like you've been calling me out all this time. You've been thinking that you really that dude. Okay, I'm gonna show you that you're not that dude." So I say, why not go ahead for that fight? Because hey, for those listening live right now, like I mentioned those guys that are out there in the super welterweight division that are around the top, right at the top, right? Backward Murders Aliyev, Israel Madrimov, Janibek Kurbanov, Charles Conwell, Sergey Bohachuk, right? And remember, like, you already have like Erickson Lubin back in the mix, and we all saw what happened with Erickson Lubin and Jermell Charlo years back at the Barclays Center, right? First round knockout, So what else in reference to a business sense? What else would be out there for Jermell Charlo outside of, like I said, Terence Crawford and Tim Tszyu? So at least those three will probably be in the mix here sometime, whether the early part of next year. You're probably going to see, okay, Tim Tszyu versus Jermell Charlo, or Tim Tszyu versus Terence Crawford, or Terence Crawford versus Jermell Charlo, or you're going to have Terence Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. Like, it's going to be likely one of those scenarios there. But for Brian Mendoza, like I said, I thought he did good in those first few rounds. Once he laid off as far as like his punch output, his punch activity, that's when Tim Tszyu took advantage of that. And I thought that he would have done a little bit better to try to set up some stuff against Tim Tszyu to get back in it, and especially when it was like when he took a number of those shots and he was still up. That's when I thought, what, you gotta go balls to the wall sometimes. You never know when you will have another opportunity for a world title. So you gotta be able to take advantage of what you're gonna be able to have. Now bringing in one of our great panelists, one of our guest speakers here on the Boxing Source to give our analysis first here of that fight between Tim Tszyu and Brian Mendoza. It's the boxing academic in the building. What's happening?
Not much. How you doing today?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Just was breaking down that fight between Tim Tszyu and Brian Mendoza, with Tim Tszyu getting a unanimous decision win there. I thought it would have been a little bit closer than the scorecards indicated. All three judges at least gave Tim Tszyu 8 of those 12 rounds, with one of them giving him 9 rounds. I thought it was, maybe like you probably could say a 7-5, maybe an 8-4, but a 7-5. But I would have gave a little bit more credit towards, Brian Mendoza, especially for the first half of that particular fight. What did you assess from this bout?
Brian Mendoza is one tough SOB. Yeah. He's very durable. At least he is at this point in the fight. It made me think of Rocky, like in one of the Rocky movies, you had, the bigger guy who just bludgeoning somebody, and then the other person just kind of taking it and willing themselves to the end.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, these are the type of like consistent sort of beatings that doesn't help a fighter age well, So
right.
Hopefully his durability, hopefully his shelf life will be a little bit longer, because we've seen people be able to take that type of punishment, and then in a blink of an eye, they no longer are able to take it. And so, he got beat up, he got beat up, but my thoughts on the fight were that Tim Tszyu is a boogeyman. He's the big boogeyman that comes around the ring and sort of bullies people. And so he's always sort of had that persona, and I think he lives up to the persona as well. I remember at one point, maybe I'm imagining it, but I could have seen him like kind of grabbing his gloves, like like he about to go and bludgeon him, sort of like how Triple G used to do. But yeah, Brian Mendoza, I didn't score the fight, but the optics of what Tim Tszyu did, obviously I know the judges scored as they saw fit, but at least the optics, I always ask myself, did Brian Mendoza do enough with the optics of what I'm seeing Tim Tszyu do, which is he's controlling sort of the action in a sense, because because Brian Mendoza was sort of retreating and then landing shots, which he was landing some decent shots himself now, but Tim Tszyu definitely controlled the center of the ring and sort of, the optics. He was the big bad wolf in a sense, and it's hard to get around those optics and beat a fighter that's throwing big shots, and dang near every clean shot they land, they kind of hurt you. I just, the way, obviously it may be different, but I think as the fight goes on, as Tim Tszyu fights more, the fight with him and Jermell seems a lot closer. If not, Tim Tszyu could also possibly win it, and that would be very dependent on if Jermell Charlo could actually hurt Tim Tszyu. If he can't hurt Tim Tszyu, very similar to how he couldn't hurt Canelo, it'd be a long night for him. It'd be a long night.
Maybe it may be, but I kind of like seeing something in this particular fight from Tim Tszyu, at least from what Brian Mendoza was doing in the first half of the fight, that I really could have seen something that Jermell Charlo could do against Tim Tszyu, especially with Jermell Charlo's performance against Brian Carlos Castaño in that rematch. Before I go into that a little bit more, bringing in another esteemed guest here on the show, MVO Uncensored in the building here, man. What's happening with you?
I love when you're live, JR. You know why? Because I can tell when you've seen my avatar. I could tell right at the moment you see my avatar. Even when Mike was talking, I saw the look on your face like, yo, what the fuck is wrong with this dude?
Man, my eyes bad. What is that? Make his picture big. Make his picture big so I can see it.
Oh, let me see if I can see it. She got a solo on him.
What am I missing?
That is Sergey Kovalev kicking the shit out of someone's dog.
He did that in real life?
Yes.
Yes, that's
Yes.
Recently?
no, this is years ago, man. Remember the whole little situation with Kovalev and what was it? His
The
wife or
woman
something like that?
who neck he broke, he punched her in the face. So he punched her in the face and kicked her dog.
Dang, Sergey.
But you know what? You know what the worst part about that is?
He ain't getting
You
none.
know what? He probably would have got in more trouble if they pushed for his abuse of the dog. That's the
Yeah, of course.
That's the worst part about it, man. Get your take you real quick. It looks like we got a fairly full little show here as far as the guests are concerned, man. MVO, what did you think about that Tim Tszyu Brian Mendoza fight?
I don't mean to sound like boxing academic right now, but I ain't watching it.
That's very odd because I watched the fight and I gave my thoughts on it.
But judging by the highlights, it looked like Tim Tszyu won.
Tim Tszyu won. Like I said, I was impressed with what Brian Mendoza was doing in those first few rounds, as far as like boxing, throwing the jabs, and moving off his back foot and being more active than what Tim Tszyu was doing coming forward. But eventually, after rounds 4 and then in the round 5 and 6, you saw that be kind of diminish and disappear a little bit. And Tim Tszyu said, like, hey, by round 5, you're gonna see me pick up the action, and once I pick up the action, then you're gonna see Brian Mendoza kind of fade a little bit, and that's pretty much what happened. But I thought that there were a couple of times when Brian Mendoza could have taken advantage of some things, because for me with Tim Tszyu comes forward a lot, but he doesn't come forward with an offensive strategy as far as like coming forward up and then throwing a jab and then work into as far as like when he cuts off the ring against his opponent. So he doesn't really eventually break his opponent down, throw the jab up and down, but he just makes everything count once he's able to be in range. And so with someone like, at least with Jermell Charlo, at least from what I saw in his second fight against Brian Carlos Castaño, who kind of has a similar type of a style as Tim Tszyu, but he kind of smothers his opponents a lot once he gets up close, so that they're not able to get their offense off. But what I seen from Jermell Charlo in that second fight was he was, consistent in throwing the jab while he was on his back foot, and making sure that his opponent pays for getting within range. You know what I'm saying? So I would like to see that in a potential fight against Tim Tszyu. Now, since MVO said that he didn't watch the fight, let me see if our other esteemed guest here watched the fight. Brother Terrell, the chef, is in the building, man. What's going on, Terrell?
Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's good to jump on another podcast to talk about boxing, and particularly what's happened this weekend. Not a heavy weekend in terms of boxing, but definitely impactful in terms of the Janibek fight, Keyshawn Davis, and of course, I was talking about Mr. Tszyu down and the down under. And as we begin to talk about Mr. Tszyu's performance against Mendoza and everything, and dissect that and cut it apart, chop it up, put some to the side, and move some to the forward, and dissect it again and look at it again, I didn't watch the fight.
Let's go, Chef. He ain't watch that shit. Listen, we got lives. Okay? We cannot be staying up. First of all, that fight ain't even start till like almost 1 o'clock in the morning. We are not staying up to watch Tim Tszyu. What the fuck? We got lives, man.
Yo, but the worst part though, Man, what was it? The co-feature about Sam Goodman. And I'm like, yo, why do they have Sam Goodman against Miguel Flores on for a full 12 rounds on here, man? Like, yo, I'm like, oh my God. Oh, I think all the people that have this thing for Showtime, man, all these subscribers here for Showtime that were going to be watching boxing, all they would have been interested in was Tim Tszyu versus Brian Mendoza. They weren't going to be interested in those Sam Goodman. The only person that probably was really interested in Sam Goodman was probably Elijah Pierce because he wants that fight with Sam Goodman. But I think Sam Goodman wants to stay there at featherweight so he wouldn't have to face Elijah Pierce. But that's a whole nother story. Now, back on this thing here with Tim Tszyu and Brian Mendoza, man. Well, at least, since we have two people that watch the fight, what do you think about Tim Tszyu's perspectives as far as like potential matchups, at least against one, Jermell Charlo, like I mentioned, and the outside chance of Terence Bud Crawford being an opponent there for Tim Tszyu?
Well, I think we're all like even on that note, we all can kind of look forward now to 154 on the future 154. We know Little Charles coming back down to 154. We know Crawford has the idea of coming up to 154. And as a matter of fact, who he faces, we know he wants Charlo. But for Tszyu, you look at people like possible Lubin. I expect Fundora to come back and make a charge back for. I'm not sure where he's ranked at within 151, which sanctioned body, but things like that. But it's interesting. It's not a North division, but like I said, those Lubin, Fundora, Zeus, we got some good names in there to mix it up. So what do you guys think? What would you guys want to see in regards to Tszyu versus whoever?
Yo, go ahead, MVO.
What I was gonna say is I don't know why everyone keeps saying that Charlo's coming back down to 154. I don't think that's happening. That for me, him coming back down to 154 is going to be him unnecessarily risking his legacy, because you don't want to go from 14 pounds and then cut back down to 154. That is not a smart thing to do. We saw what happened when a certain guy from Pensacola, Florida,
Picola,
went up to heavyweight and then cut back down to 175. He was never the same again after that. I don't think that that's something that Charlo should do. If he's going to cut down, 160 is food. 160 is wide open. You cut back down to 160 and you go try to be a two-time, two-weight undisputed champion at 160. Now, as for Tim Tszyu, what I would like to see next for him is for him to fight either an Erickson Lubin or a Charles Conwell next.
The Lubin fight gonna look probably worse than my boy from Detroit,
Harrison.
It's gonna look the same.
Yeah, but you gotta start picking off these names. You gotta start cleaning out the division if you're Tim Tszyu. Who else is at 154? Castano. I don't know if you've seen him recently, but Castano he looks like Marcos Maidana right about now.
Man, I seen him. I seen him around during that week of Canelo Charlo, and there were like a few guys there that were competing at 154. But Castano ain't been in the paint. Ain't been in the mix for a good little while since his loss to Jermell Charlo. So it's like
so you got to look at that. You got to look at a guy like I guess even Jesus Ramos, because the fight with Lubin was controversial. Right. He already beat Terrell Gausha, so it is what it is with that. I don't know if anyone cares about Takeshi Inoue.
I think he already had that fight, didn't he? Or something, I don't know.
And then he
already fought him.
I think the only other two names there is just the champions. You know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's
Charlo
the
doesn't
thing.
come out in 154. So we're not looking at Charlo Crawford at all. And
No, I think Crawford's going to fight the Spence rematch. Listen, once Steven Espinosa came out publicly and said that the rematch is happening, I think that's pretty much where we're at with that. So I think you're going to see Spence versus Crawford part 2. So that's going to leave Tim Tszyu without a dance partner. If I'm Tim Tszyu, I'm looking to see if I could fight that Murtazaliev guy. See if maybe the IBF will lift that belt off of Charlo. I'm still wondering why he didn't push for the WBC to lift that belt off of Charlo, because for all intents and purposes, that should have been a unification yesterday. You know.
Well, I mean, yeah, the thing about it was he would have tried to push for it before, Jermell Charlo's fight with Canelo Alvarez, because if WBO, was able to push to, have that belt stripped, then why not go ahead and have, the WBC and them like say, hey, we're going to elevate Brian Mendoza from interim champion to full champion. There for this to, basically be a unification. Now it's pretty much like, he's not the interim champion anymore because he went ahead and just had this fight, So it's just, Jermell Charlo there as the full champion until he, makes his decision on what he's going to do.
So what if Charlo goes to 160? He's not like us. I'm relatively.
He'll definitely beat that Janibek dude.
And he ain't gonna fight Janibek. Well, for one, that's a cross promotion, which we probably won't see like that. But there's like Lara at WBA. I don't favor him against Adames. I don't. So I don't see him at 160 at all. Some guy named Vincenzo Gualtieri in the IBF. I have never heard this guy. So
good. I'm going to talk about it, but good.
Especially since his name is Vincenzo, not Francesco.
Like, yeah, that's the thing, man. Like that guy says, man, like, hey, 160 is kind of trash right now, man. That's pretty much what we got, because that, man. Yeah, I'll go ahead and go into that little fight, because I'll go into the card in that co-feature bout, because like ain't no way. What was it? It was what did I say the odds were before this fight? Like Janibek was like minus 1100. Like come on, man.
Something like that.
Yeah, like minus 1100 against this dude, and like Gualtieri, like he was like 21 wins with 7 wins by KO.
We were talking about that last week.
Yeah. And I'm like, come on, man. Like y'all got to do better than this, man. Like y'all gotta do something. And he went up ahead and he got this win. And like I was saying during the fight, man, I was like, man, did Gualtieri even pinch this dude? Because he was just there. He was just moving around and trying to like he really some type of boxer, like having his hands down and moving around like he's somebody, man. Like, come on, man.
I saw somebody. I'm not gonna say who, but someone prominent in the sport of boxing said that Gualtieri looks like Sergio Martinez. I'm like, dude, like you can't be in the sport of boxing if you think this guy fights like Sergio Martinez just because he had his hands down. I'm like, come on, dude. Sergio Martinez at 48 years old still is better than this guy.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Like, come on, man. Like, I'm still trying to figure out how in the world this dude beat Esquiva Falcao, man. Like, I don't know, man. Like that, yeah, that's the wildest thing, because but Falcao, what was that? That was 2021. Did he have? Yeah, he had that fight against Volney in 2021 as part of that Crawford Porter thing, and man, I ain't know if he was really that impressive in that particular matchup. So Man, that was the best y'all could do for Janibek. Come on, man. Like, what are we doing? You know what I'm saying? And so now it's like, who else is going to be out there for Janibek to face now that he's unified champion? They're going to come up with someone like a Nursultanov or somebody like that.
Well, according to him, he only wants to fight the other champions. He said he doesn't want to fight. He doesn't want to defend his belts. He wants to unify. So my thing is this. If he wants to unify, how is he going to fight Carlos Adames? Because if yesterday was any indication, the WBC didn't allow Tim Tszyu to unify with Brian Mendoza. So why would they then turn around and allow Janibek to unify with the interim champion at 160? It doesn't make any sense.
It depends because, with what the word has been going around over the past week and a half or so, that Jermell Charlo will be on that card November 25th against Jose Benavidez Jr. And unless the WBC, has Jose Benavidez Jr. magically appear in those middleweight rankings, maybe they'll just have that decision to say before Jermell Charlo gets in the ring that they're going to end up stripping Jermell Charlo of that WBC belt. So, we'll see. But hey, Carlos Adames said, hey, he has no issues saying that he'll go up there and face Janibek. So, why not go ahead and do that? You know what I'm saying?
Well, take a closer look real quick. How good is Janibek? Is he the real deal? Solid performer. Definitely got power in that left hand. We see that. Good footwork, things like that. Looks like to be good ring IQ. How good is this guy?
Man, I don't know, man. I mentioned that thing there with Esquiva Falcao when he faced Patrice Volney November 2021. That was the same card where Janibek was up against Hassan Ndam. In that particular fight, some may say that Hassan Ndam maybe wasn't, trying to get himself knocked out or trying to, get in the mix up with Janibek. I wasn't really impressed with him at that time, and I didn't really see much from him, over the past few fights. At least with his fight against Denzel Bentley, right? I wasn't really, all too impressed with him in that one, either. So it's almost like they're putting them at, round number 1 or number 2 by default because you really haven't seen many, fights at the top of the middleweight division that could separate one fighter from the rest of them, So with Janibek, he could have these performances where he stops these guys that, aren't necessarily supposed to be in the same ring with him. But if you have him against someone like a Carlos Adames, are you going to favor Janibek over Carlos Adames? No. I'm going to just be straight up. I wouldn't.
No.
So yeah, unless if they figure out a way to say, hey, we're gonna have Janibek face, one of these guys. All he's got to be able to face is a Nursultanov or someone they could probably have there as, or maybe a Falcao. He's got to have a defense against Falcao, maybe, in the meantime, unless they figure out a way to have him face
but how can we even justify him fighting a Falcao when Falcao just lost to Gualtieri?
Yeah, exactly. But this is just something where he's put up as an opponent. Who else are they gonna have there against him?
Well, the answer at 160 is one of the Charlos.
Yeah, either that or, and I don't think this is gonna happen anytime soon either. The WBO calls for a mandatory and names Chris Eubank as a mandatory.
That would be interesting.
It would. Definitely. He definitely fits that picture. Definitely.
Yeah. So, maybe a fight against Chris Eubank, we'll see. But outside of that, there really isn't much interest in, Janibek or pretty much anybody there in the middleweight division. And, I'll see how the ratings turn out, but I don't think, that many people were interested in that main event, man. They had, the co-feature about Keyshawn Davis against Tahir Albright, and Keyshawn ended up winning a majority decision there against Tahir Albright. I thought, they gave Tahir Albright 5 rounds, so that was pretty interesting there. I thought, Keyshawn would have had at least, 8 rounds or something like that, maybe 7 to 8 rounds in that one. But, they're putting Keyshawn there as far as like, he's saying that he should be mentioned among the top at the 135-pound division, the top 10. But I'm like, wait a minute. Y'all got, is this in particular a top rank? Y'all got a number of fighters there at 135 pounds that could be facing Keyshawn Davis. But Keyshawn Davis is out here mentioning that he wants to get in a fight against a guy that's currently at 140 pounds right now and wants to have that fight in December over in Orlando. And I'm like, so y'all can't match him up against any of your other guys there at 135? It don't make no much sense, man. I'm like, come on. He's talking about, I've been considering, having this fight here where, I can face Jose Pedraza. I'm like, man, Jose Pedraza's out there at 140. Like, if you're gonna do that, you could have had, Jermaine Ortiz there that's moving up to 140. You could have said something about that, So what are you doing? But I don't know. I thought I would have had at least seen something there from Keyshawn Davis that, maybe he could have just stood out and maybe tried to invoke a stoppage victory over Tahir Albright. But, at least for me, right after the fight, I was saying like there's like something missing. There's like an element missing from Keyshawn Davis that like says, okay, he could potentially be, one of those guys that could, really challenge for a top spot at 135 here in the near future, man.
Well, even in the fight against Albright last night, like I said, me chat a little bit real quick on Twitter last night, Jay. It was a rough and tough fight. Albright made it rough, rugged, things like that.
Yeah.
Taken to the canvas, just rough tactics. And as I was watching that, I was like, well, what is his strategy to win the fight? Is he trying to rattle Keyshawn and get him out of his game? To Keyshawn's credit, he did remain composed. I saw him at different spots. Just boom, boom, quick jab, boom, 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 and just touch him up and things like that. And he never gave into the, let me just get out of my game, just go wild. He never did that. So credit to him. But once again, kind of the same question. How good is Keyshawn, right? And the thing about it, sometimes you can talk your way into an ass whipping, like that which happens in boxing pretty often. You can talk ass whipping. So I'm not saying he's doing that, but like I said, just you 11-0, 10-0, whatever it is like that. Focus on your division and fight in front of you. Knock down one by one. Is he ready for the top levels? He talks like it. He walks like it. But is in reality, if you put him with someone in the top 10, what will he do at this point? So that's
not a damn thing.
Yeah.
like for example, right? I mean, Top Rank had, what was it, a few months back over in Oklahoma, that fight between George Kambosos and Maxie Hughes. That was, a very close fight, but they said George Kambosos ended up winning. Would Keyshawn Davis be able to go into a bout against either one of those guys and kind of like show like, okay, this is me where it could show out or whatever it is, like he should be able to, but there's just something that says like, I'm not all too sure. And like you were saying there, Terrell, like Tahir Albright kind of like made it a little bit rough. You had a couple of instances where, it almost seemed like a wrestling match, but Keyshawn stayed composed in that particular instance. He was, there in the corner with Esau and Red Spikes. Of course, he had the whole thing with Bomac. But like for me, like I could have like I wanted to see something that said, "Hey, like show that you're that guy. Like you boast like you're that guy, but show like you're that guy." Like I mean, even in that fight against Anthony Yiggett, in April, he was able to finish off Yiggett, but it's like I wanted to see that against Juan Carlos Burgos. I wanted to see that against Patera, which was like a couple months back too. Like he should be able to have this string where he can stop these guys. But yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know what it is. Maybe he needs to have a little bit more fights where he could just say, "Hey, I'm this much better than this dude, and I'll show it to y'all." Maybe that's it.
Yeah, but who's the guys that he's that much better than? Like, I don't see it. We saw when he was talking about fighting Frank Martin, all of a sudden he said that his handlers and him were saying that he need like 9 more fights before he fights Frank Martin. So I don't even believe that he truly believes in his ability. I think that he's just looking to sell himself to try to make himself a bigger name while he's getting there. But I don't think he believes he's even close to being there.
Yeah, not just who's hanging around. Well, he's what in a Crawford camp, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, you could easily talk your way into an ass whipping. If they would put him in with Frank Martin right now, that ship will go down real fast. We know that. Just at this point now.
Oh, I didn't get that last part.
Yeah, sorry about that. So at this point now, I mean, Frank Martin is just a much superior and experienced fighter than Keyshawn is at 10-0, right? You're getting there, man, but just please chill, bide your time. That's the history of boxing. Bide your time. And I was kind of looking at that too. You look at some recent examples within people with these short fight history, things like that. The Russians, Lomachenko, the guy that at 122, I think it is, something like that. The Mongolian, whatever. Those people.
You talking about you're not talking about MJ, right?
Yeah, he's at 122, right? With goodness, I forgot his name.
He used to be unified champ.
He's supposed to fight. He was supposed to fight, but what's my man name that lost to the Japanese dude?
Yeah. He was supposed to fight Stephen Fulton for undisputed. Yeah, that's MJ.
Oh, MJ.
Yeah. So I mean, people like that, they have these extensive background records and stuff like that. I mean, Keyshawn Davis has a amateur history.
You know what? He's talking about Ubali, the one that lost to Donaire.
Oh,
yeah.
He just thinks that Donaire is Japanese. I just realized that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, Keyshawn, keep it up. He's gonna talk us right into an ass whooping. That's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, you have you're talking all that talk, but like someone like Carl Moretti or Todd DeBow is like saying, hold your horses or whatever it is. And I forgot, what is it? Evan Korn is now the dude that's like having more of a say in matchmaking these days. So yeah, I don't know, man. That's gonna be interesting because Evan Korn's supposed to have a bigger part of doing stuff in reference to Top Rank as far as matchmaking goes. So when you're in the camp there in B&B Boxing with Terence Crawford and then you have your brothers there, DB3 or whatever it is, you want to show like, hey, you're the top of the line, you're the cream of the crop. But like I said, I mean, I just I'm not sure about where Keyshawn Davis is at this particular point. So maybe you have that going down, man. But outside of that, there wasn't really that much activity going on. In the boxing scene. Anything from you, NVO, that you kind of seen that's out there in the boxing thing or boxing academic gas something?
I bet he watched Jake Paul fight or whatever the Paul.
Yes, I did watch it. Yes, I did watch Logan Paul.
Logan Paul fight.
Paul, defending the honor of his wife while his fiance. Shout out to Logan Paul. What's wrong about your Logan Paul?
I mean, he got semi decent win. Throw big shots. I think they actually take it serious.
They do take
So
it. They take it more seriously than Vincenzo Gualtieri. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that.
What are we talking about?
Hey, yo, maybe put Logan Paul against Vincenzo Gualtieri.
Yeah, like listen, I would have rather seen Logan Paul than seen Duke Reagan.
Oh yeah, that fight. I did watch that fight with Duke Reagan, man. Ooh, yeah, I don't know how far he's gonna go, man. Because
Yeah, when I saw Duke Reagan, first thing I thought was he needs to get into the family business because this boxing thing not working out.
yeah, because he couldn't do much as far as like
Yeah.
what busting much of a injury to Jose Perez, but I mean he's there in 9 fights and he only has 1 stoppage win over 9 fights, and that was in his first fight.
Yep. And if
And
boxing academic don't know what the family business is, Google his daddy.
I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I got other things I would rather clip my toenails than type on the keyboard to find out what his daddy does.
But
his daddy dead now, I think.
Oh, okay. No offense to the family, but he's like in the mafia or something.
Nah, he's a D boy.
But
Lil Meech.
Like the thing with Duke Reagan too in this particular fight, like he got knocked down by Hook, and shoot, to me, I didn't like, to be honest, I didn't really think Perez really got that much off of that. You know what I'm saying? I didn't really think he got that much off that hook that he landed. And Reagan was still able to go down from that. So I'm like, ooh. Yeah, he is gonna be a good little bit before he gets, fully back in the game, man. And he's there like the featherweight division, So it's whew. Like shoot, nah, they couldn't put him up against like a shoe. Like he ended up like losing the shoe with the amateurs. Like we see here, man, like Shushu is way ahead of Duke Reagan at this point. So it's like, man, I don't know how they're gonna match him up from this point forward, but that's gonna be some crazy, man. It's definitely gonna be something crazy. We really don't have much coming up here in the near future, man. The only thing I'm looking forward to is this fight card in November. It looks like they may be moving some fights to be part of that Benavidez Andre card. And like they moved that Super Matias Shozahan ownership fight to November 25th. It was supposed to be November 4th, but they scrapped that card that was supposed to be there in the Cosmopolitan in Las Vegas. So they add this to this pay-per-view card, and we know about the whole thing with Shakur Stevenson and Edwin De Los Santos. So I ain't even too on to that.
Well, what was your impression of the first press conference with Benavidez and Andre?
I mean, Andre, did what he could do in order to sell the fight. He tried to boost this as this is the fight in the super middleweight division. David Benavidez, of course, has been there's long-standing top 2 guy there at 168 pounds. Both guys are defeated. But they made their effort to sell the fight. But going off past history and whatnot, I mean, if y'all followed David Benavidez and Demetrius Andrade and how they think about each other and how the camps think about each other, they have like a lot of respect for one another. So they did their best to sell this fight. It's just going to be a very good tactical fight, at least for me. And we just got to see like how Demetrius Andrade is going to handle the pressure from David Benavidez in this fight. So I'll wait to see how that goes, man.
Yeah. A quick question.
All right.
Why is the boxing source on fire?
Oh no, we had the whole little thing with the background. You know what I'm saying? We had to touch things up here a little bit. You know what I'm saying with the background. So yeah, that's how we doing things here
Yeah, you're hot,
at the boxing source. You know what I'm saying?
hot stepper.
Here come the
I
hot
thought it
step.
was on fire because they added Deontay Wilder to the graphic.
Huh?
I'm surprised you didn't make this episode a tribute to Anthony Joshua's birthday today.
Oh no. We don't have karma. We don't have karma included in this. So so nah, this is it. This isn't one of those Anthony Joshua tribute shows or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? So nah, that ain't how it is, man. Hey, we got like a shout out to Ness in the building, man. Where he says he got David by stoppage in the late rounds. He said AJ will taste a big punch in his life. He will MMA David. Well, we'll see how that goes on November, man. But looking forward to seeing how that's going to go and how that's going to end up. But that's what I got here for this particular podcast. Like I said, shout out to everybody that was listening live. Y'all go ahead, y'all hit the like button, y'all share this podcast for boxing fans to listen to, man, and hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. If you haven't checked it out, we still have that interview up with Elijah Garcia on the Boxing Source YouTube channel, so y'all can check that out. He did, have a few comments about, about that fight between David Benavidez and Demetrius Andrade, and also, a potential fight between him and like a Carlos Adames or any of those guys that hold the belts there in the middleweight division. So y'all be sure to check that out, and we'll see if we can get back at it with the midweek report on Wednesday, and like I said, same time next week, Sunday, with the Boxing Source show here. Like I said, it's the longest running podcast in existence, according to reports. So y'all be sure to check us out every Sunday. We appreciate the support. And with that being said, how about y'all? Like I said, at the end of every show, the point of boxing is to hit, not get hit, not to say the trade. Peace out.